Okay. Good evening, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I'm currently in the land of the morning calm, which is Korea, for those who don't know. And tonight we're going to be doing a Q&A on some travel tips coming from my massive trove of experience and years of traveling the world. So a lot of you couldn't be here live this evening. Sorry, my colors turned up ugly. Couldn't be here live this evening, and so a lot of you submitted questions in advance. So we're going to start in order of operations. We're going to be talking about points, how you can use points to travel in luxury travel accommodations, not really pay very much actual money for it. And then we're going to be talking about where to eat when you travel, how to find good deals, good prices on quality local cuisine, where you can stay, what to look for, where in your accommodations, how to find them, what dangers to look for when you're booking, and also transit. Once you're on the ground, how do you get around? And this I'm going to be using Korea and Japan and Germany and Italy and the United Kingdom sort of as examples to provide you with some details. So let's dive right in with the points game. So a lot of you have seen my reviews on my Travels with the Contessa channel, and there I end up reviewing a lot of business class flights. In fact, I have 2 first class flights coming up in the next year that I'm really excited to review, long haul first class. So not American first class, which is really just business class. Anyway, and many of you have asked, I actually got accused of being a trust fund baby once, and that's just not true. I come from an extremely middle class background, and I count myself still as being extremely middle of the road socioeconomically, but I like luxury travel. And so one of the best ways to be able to fly all these long haul business class products is with credit card points. So especially if you are active duty US military, you need to take advantage of that. And I wish I had known this years and years before I learned it, because many of the credit cards in the United States waive those annual fees. So the American Express Platinum comes with a $695 annual fee. However, if you are active duty military or a spouse, you don't have to pay for that fee. You get that card for free with all of its amazing perks. So you get the big sign-up bonus, which right now is like 100,000 points, I think, if you get the American Express Platinum. As long as you meet the spending requirements, I think it's $5,000 in 3 months. And then you get that 100,000 point bonus. You get the bonus points on the money you've spent on the card. And then you get all these perks. Like, for instance, that comes with Priority Pass access. Priority Pass is a network of lounges worldwide, and some of those lounges are serious top quality airport lounges, the kind you generally only see from the outside, and you see these nicely dressed people going in. Yeah, well, if you have a card like the American Express Platinum, you get free access to that. You get access to the Centurion Lounge, which is American Express's own amazingly luxurious, very comfortable, lovely food, lovely drinks lounges. Some of them have spas. You can get free massages at them. If you have an American Express Platinum, you get access to those for free. And as I said, if you're active duty military, if you're a spouse of an active duty military member, the annual fee gets waived on those. So I'm a spouse. My husband is active duty, and we have a lot of these reward credit cards for which we don't pay an annual fee, but we get all the perks. Now, the thing is, here's the deal. Never get a credit card unless you can treat it like a debit card. And what I mean is, the amount that you spend on it is the amount of money you actually have in the bank account to pay for your bills. Never get a credit card and use it as a credit facility. That is financially and fiscally irresponsible, because the APR, the interest rates on credit cards and charge cards are exorbitant and usurious in the United States. Not so much in other countries where they have laws to protect consumers, but the US doesn't have those kind of laws. So if you get a credit card like the American Express Platinum, I don't care if you're active duty military or not, if you get a card like the American Express Platinum, only use it for purchases that you would normally make in any given normal month. If your normal spending does not add up to the amount of spend that it requires to get that welcome bonus, that 100,000 point welcome bonus, don't get the card. Do not get the card and go and make extra purchases just to get those bonus points, because that's a fool's errand. There's no reason that you should be getting into debt. So only use a credit card like a debit card, as in it's paid off every month, every single cent, paid off every month. If you can do that, then I really recommend going out and starting to play the reward card game, because those welcome bonuses, 100,000 points, for those who don't know, that can be one-way first class on Etihad from Seoul to Washington, D.C., if you find the right points deal. Basically, that can be 1.5 business class tickets. That could be a round trip business class ticket on Turkish Airlines, for instance, from Seoul to Washington, D.C., which is a massive journey if you make the purchase when tickets are being offered at a low enough points rate. So 100,000 points can get you really far. And of course, for every dollar you spend on the card, you get points that add up. And those points, you can get outsized value if you transfer those points to airlines' frequent flyer programs. So if you are active duty military spouse, American Express waives the annual fees, Chase waives the annual fees, Citibank waives the annual fees. Capital One does not waive the annual fees. So if you get a Capital One card, then make sure you can get value out of it that basically cancels out that annual fee. But Chase, Citi, American Express waive the fees for card holders. So you can get those reward cards, and make sure you get a card that accumulates points and not cash back. Cash back is never worth as much as those points. Because if you get $1,000 cash back, or you get 100,000 points with which you can buy a $10,000 plane ticket, the points are worth more than that cash back is. So I always recommend getting reward points and not cash back, unless you really need cash and you don't plan on traveling. But if you're watching me, probably you plan on traveling someday. And it's called aspirational travel, traveling at a level of comfort and luxury that might not normally fit within your budget. And I can guarantee you that 10 round trip business class flights a year wouldn't normally fit in my budget. But thanks to the welcome bonuses on these reward cards, the fact that I don't have to pay for the annual fee, the amount of points I get from my normal everyday spend, that is what allows me to travel this way. So you have to look at your spending and decide what's right for you. And if you have any questions at any time, let me know in the comments and I will address that question. So that's the points game. That's it in a nutshell. You're active duty military. Take advantage of it while you can. We'd been in the military. I'd been a spouse for 3 years before I found out about this. My husband had been in the military for 13 before he found out about it. So all those years he could have been taking advantage of all these points. All those thousands of dollars he spent on everything in his life could have added up to points that could have been applied to business and first class travel. Yeah. So my lesson learned to you. Okay, so moving on from the points game, the next question was, how do you find reasonable places to stay where you travel? Well, obviously, there's going to be a little local influence about that. The kind of options you may have in Korea are not going to be the same kind of options you have in Japan necessarily, or in Italy, France, Germany, etc. But in general, hotels are always going to be more expensive than a hostel. Hostels will be the cheapest. Hostels have issues, though, because a lot of hostels, you're going to end up in a group dormitory. And then you have to worry about the safety of your belongings. That theft happens very often in hostels, especially the lower the price, the less secure the hostel is. So, there's also cleanliness issues with hostels in some places. But hotels, of course, you get a private room, you have more security, you have your own bathroom. You pay for that. Also, hotels don't have kitchens, which means if you stay at a hotel, you're going to have to eat out for every meal. Now, we'll talk about that in a moment. That's an eats thing. But Airbnb started off as a very reasonably priced option, but now it's gotten industrialized, and now, massive property management companies, or large property management companies anyway, have gotten a hold of Airbnb, and so they've bought up all these apartments in historic city centers, and they're now renting them out at not exactly bargain rate prices. So that's not optimal, obviously, but you can still find some good deals with Airbnb. And you can still get outsized value out of an Airbnb, because what you want to make sure you have is an Airbnb with a kitchen, because that means you can cook yourself. You don't have to eat out for any meal if you don't want to. And that will save you immense amounts of money grocery shopping and doing your own cooking. Now, of course, maybe you don't want to spend your whole vacation cooking. I get it. But even still, there are ways that just having a kitchen, you won't necessarily have to cook everything from scratch. We'll talk about that in a minute. But having that kitchen will save you a lot of money. And so even if it seems like, say it's $90 a night for a hotel room, it's $90 a night for your Airbnb. Okay, but for your hotel, you're going to have to spend all that extra money on food, on prepared food in a restaurant or a cafeteria or something, whereas in the Airbnb, you don't have to. So, but you have to keep your eye out. Airbnb bookings can be very tricky about all these extra hidden fees that don't show up when you're first looking at the per night value. So what you need to look at is click on C, and then it will show you a breakdown on the right-hand side of all the fees, including taxes, including their service fee, which, by the way, that's not an Airbnb service fee. That's each owner kind of sets, each host sets the service fee, and also cleaning fee. And it's a cleaning fee where they can really try to put in a lot of hidden money. I've had places where the cleaning fee for a week ended up being $250 extra. And then they still expect you to clean up before you leave. So it's not like you can just leave it as is and they'll be okay with that. So they expect you to clean up, and then they expect you to pay them $250 to clean up too, which I think is outrageous. So you need to keep your eye on that cleaning fee. And I've seen service fees in the hundreds of dollars as well. And the service fee, I mean, what the hell? So I find that a really tricky, cheeky thing about Airbnb. And a lot of booking sites are like that. They won't show you the taxes. They won't show you the total fare, the total cost of your hotel or your plane ticket, until you actually go to the booking site and click on book. And then it shows you, right? So keep your eye out for those extra hidden fees. Now, to note about Airbnb, a lot of properties will offer length of stay discounts. So if you book 1 week or 2 weeks, some places offer a monthly discount. So the longer you stay in a place, the lower generally the price per night is going to be. So if you stay in one place, one city, make that your base, and then make excursions to other locations in the vicinity, you're probably going to save a lot of money versus traveling from city to city to city and staying in a different city every night. So that's another tip. Plan your vacation to be centered around one central location and use that as your hub of operations. You sleep there, but you can always go other places to see sites in different localities. So, okay, that stays. And you can use points to book hotels as well, but generally reward points, it is not a good value to transfer reward points for hotels, because whereas you can get one-way business class from Seoul to Washington, D.C. on Turkish Airlines, sometimes for 66,000 points, right? One night in a hotel will cost you 75,000 points. So 66,000 points for what would normally be a $3,000 ticket, or 75,000 points for what might be a $250 room, right? That doesn't track. That doesn't make any sense at all. So I always recommend paying cash for your stays and saving your points for flights. That's my tip, my recommendation. Are there any questions about any of that? Right. So sum it up. When you're booking a stay, a hotel, etc., keep your eye out for those hidden fees, those taxes, service fees, cleaning fees, all of that before making your final decision. And hopefully maybe someday Airbnb will actually be honest and show what the total price is when you're actually looking through your list of search results. But, one other tip. Be careful about location, because remember, with Airbnb especially, they won't show you the final location until you book. So you want to make sure that you have good cancellation terms when you book. I always try to make sure that I have at least a week or two from when I book to cancel, so that I have a couple of weeks still to think about it if I want to. Because let's say you book that Airbnb and then it shows you the actual location, and the actual location is out in excuse my language. And then what can you do about it? Well, you can cancel it if you have good cancellation terms that allow it, but if you don't, you might be stuck. And I've seen a lot of people who've gotten stuck with their hosts, where the host didn't acknowledge that they had prevaricated about the location, and Airbnb didn't give a shit. So beware of false advertising when it comes to where exactly that property is. Because remember, Florence could be the city, or it could be the greater Florence area, which means you might be in Fiesole, or some village that's kind of well outside of the historic city, well outside, like 30 minutes by bus, for instance. Okay, so be careful about the location of your Airbnb. So beware of location, check for good cancellation terms, generous cancellation terms, and full refund. Make sure it says full refund. Check for those hidden fees, and take advantage of long stay discounts. That's my tip on stays. Now, of course, if you're watching this in retrospect and any questions crop up, just leave them in the comments, and I promise I will answer them in the comments for you, okay? Moving on to eats. Okay, there's a lot of tricks for eating inexpensively, but quality and locally. First off, if you're looking to dine in a historic tourist city center or the tourist area of any locality, and I don't care where in the world you are paying for the location, you are paying for the view, you are not really paying for quality food. If you get quality food, then you're lucky, but most of the price on that menu per dish is the price of your seat, not the price of the service or the food. So that means, for instance, if you're in Venezia, if you're in Venice and you're in the Piazza San Marco, that square is all about the view. It's all about seeing the basilica. It's all about seeing the campanile, the bell tower. It's about people watching. It's about being in cafes that were inhabited by great luminaries of the 19th century literature scene, right? You're not paying for the food, you're paying for the view and the location. So that doesn't mean that some of those cafes don't serve top quality coffee. There's a couple of famous ones that do, actually, but they don't necessarily serve the best food. So if you want good local cuisine, you've got to get away from the tourist areas. Go see the tourist areas, sit maybe on the side of the fountain and enjoy the view. People watch from a stoop or a stone bench that's part of the public works. But when it comes to actually eating, get away from the tourist area. In fact, if the menus are in 4 different languages, walk away. What you want, honestly, is a place that only has menus in the local language. And yeah, I know in past times that would have been a killer. You couldn't have done anything, right? But now you've got Google Translate, all these translation apps. You can take a picture, you can get an idea, you can look up some keywords, or you can be really adventuresome and just pick something randomly off of the menu, which I did in Japan. Once we were in Osaka and we went into a restaurant that had not only no menus in any language of the 8 languages in which that I can read and understand, the prices were in Chinese numbers, were in Chinese numerals. So I didn't even really know how much they were because I didn't have internet in Japan. I had no idea how much the food was. I had no idea what we were ordering. So we just pointed at some things and got it. And one of the things we ended up getting was raw chicken. It was disgusting. I'll never eat it again. But I did eat it. I tried it. I gave it my college best. Point is, you can have a fun adventure that way. And you're going to get much more local, authentic cuisine if the menu has not been geared towards tourists. So get away from the city center. Get into the parts of town that aren't pretty. I mean, I don't want you to walk into a completely disintegrating neighborhood where there's gang warfare. But I mean, go to the places where the real locals live and where the local language is being spoken freely, where there aren't signs in 4 different languages, and find a cafe, because cafes, especially in Europe, nearly always offer, bars actually also offer a lunch menu. And so, for example, in Italy and Spain and France, you can find places where they have a lunch menu where it's, you get 3 courses for 11 or 12 euros. You get your, some kind of starter, which could be salad, which could be risotto, which could be some other kind of bready thing. You're going to get a main dish, which is usually some kind of meaty thing, and then it will come with dessert and coffee. Right? And so all that for 11 or 12 euros is pretty damn reasonable. And that's what the local people eat for lunch. It's going to be home cooked by most likely probably the local grandmotherly type lady. And it's going to be tasty, and it's going to be affordable, and it's going to be authentic, and that's how people really live. So get away from the tourist areas. Now, that's if you eat at a restaurant. Obviously, if you have, like I said, an Airbnb where you have a kitchen, then you can go to the local grocery stores. Again, you might have to get out of the tourist core to actually find a real grocery store that actually has proper groceries. Grocery shopping, you can cook for yourself. So that's a great way to save money also. But there's a medium ground there. So you can cook completely for yourself. You can let someone else do the cooking completely for you. Or a lot of grocery stores in a lot of countries have delicatessen counters. And what that is, that means, I don't mean you're going to get lunch meat, although you can do that. They actually have completely pre-cooked dishes, local dishes. You know, in Italy, for instance, you can get fresh pesto, you can get roasted vegetables, all packaged and ready to go and ready to eat. You can get like entire pasta dishes, packaged and ready to go. Cooked meat, packaged and ready to go. Cooked vegetables, packaged and ready to go. And you can go and basically buy several things and, you know, maybe get some utensils. If you have an Airbnb, snag some utensils from your Airbnb. The delicatessen might also have some like plastic or wooden forks and knives and spoons and some napkins. Grab a couple of things from the counter. It will usually be, you know, a refrigerator case. Grab the things from the refrigerator case, grab your utensils, and go and make a picnic for yourself somewhere. Go sit on the side of the fountain and eat. Go find a public park and sit and eat. Hopefully you're not traveling in the dead of winter or when the weather is absolutely the worst it can be in any given place. Or go back to your Airbnb, bring your pre-cooked food back to your Airbnb and eat it there. It will be more expensive than cooking for yourself, but it will be less expensive than eating in a restaurant. So that's my recommendation for cheap eats in any given location. Get away from the tourist areas, go to the grocery store, to the delicatessen counter, and get some nice local pre-prepared foods. They'll usually be pretty clean for those who care about that sort of thing. And they'll be fresh. They'll be made like that day by some probably older woman in the kitchen that comes with the grocery store. And of course, if you are going to eat in a restaurant, in a lot of touristy places in Europe, not so much in Asia, I haven't really seen this in Asia, but in Europe, in the tourist centers, they actually literally charge you to sit down. And by which I mean there's a cover charge just to put your butt in a chair. It's like usually €1.50 a person. And that supposedly covers like the water that they serve you or something like that. But it really is just a charge for sitting down. So if you want to go to a place that doesn't have a cover charge, again, generally you have to get away from the tourist areas. Okay, so those are my tips for eats. So we've talked about points, we've talked about stays, we've talked about eats, transit. Once you get to where you're going, a lot of Americans, their first thought is to rent a car. Okay, you can do that, but be aware that every country in which I've ever lived or traveled outside of the US has massive gas prices. And I mean 5-6 times what it is in the US often. And also massive highway tolls. So for instance, in France, to go about 6 hours on the highway, so for my imperial measurement people, to go about 300 miles or 500 kilometers, it's 100 euros in tolls, one way. They really don't want you just burning carbon, dumping carbon into the atmosphere. So they make it very expensive to do so. So if you rent a car, be aware that you're not just paying for the car, you're going to pay for tolls. And some countries you have to get a decal, the sticker you have to put on your car in addition to the tolls. So you have to have a decal and then you still have to pay tolls. So you're paying like 10, 20 euros for the decal. And then you're paying at every single toll booth. And of course, every single toll booth adds time and there's little traffic jams by the toll booths. Locals, of course, get this transponder, but you can't get that transponder because you're renting a car. So that means keep that in mind. If you rent a car, you're going to have gas, you're going to have tolls, you might have highway decals to pay for. You're going to have the stress of figuring out possibly completely foreign systems of signs. yeah, so I don't really recommend renting a car unless you feel really comfortable in the country that you're going. Maybe you've been there before and you know how the roads work, you know how the signs work, or you're going someplace where the sites you want to see are not accessible by public transit. Okay, then maybe you want to rent a car. However, a lot of countries outside of the US have very sophisticated public transit systems that will cover the whole country, more or less. So, Italy, for instance, don't rent a car. Oh God. The train network is super extensive. The bus network is extensive. You've got public trains, you've got private trains that are now competing with each other, and they're inexpensive. And there's coach buses, and there's local buses, and there's trams, and it's all very affordable and very easy to navigate. So I really recommend checking out the local transit, the local public transportation network of the place to which you are going. Germany, unfortunately, is not in that category. Germany's network is not nearly as extensive. The trains are really expensive. Even the local trains and buses, the prices are through the roof because they privatized it about 20 years ago now, and it's just been a big fucking mess since they did. Public transit should never be privatized. It should never have to make a profit. Okay, so box off. But then there are civilized countries like Italy and Korea, and Japan is kind of odd. They have multiple train systems, actually. Like Italy and Korea, where they still have their public system. And in the case of Italy, they've actually added a private company that is in addition to, so is competition for the public system. And that is actually kind of working out well for everyone, for consumers anyway. So yeah, I definitely recommend trying to take the trains, the trams, the buses. Don't rent a car unless it's really essential to the sites you want to see. The other thing you have to consider is parking. In a lot of historic places, the places you want to be and see, there is either no parking, certainly no street parking, which means you have to rent a parking spot for the entire time you're there. And that can be 50 euros a day in some cases. Or you have to park outside of town and then take a taxi in or take public transit anyway. So you have to consider that you're also going to be paying for parking. I know that in a lot of places in the United States outside of the big cities, no one's used to paying for parking. But even in small towns in Europe, you often have to pay for parking, or you are limited in how long you can park in places, and they will ticket you and they will boot your car. So yeah, I don't recommend renting a car. I recommend looking into the trains, the buses, the trams. Now, Uber. Uber is now increasingly available worldwide. If you have a credit card that gets you Uber credits, though, be aware that if you are a US cardholder, those credits will not apply outside of the United States. I made that mistake. I thought that our Uber credits applied in the United Kingdom. They didn't. We spent a lot of money on Uber for nothing because we got nothing off of it. Uber in certain places won't exist at all. There is no Uber in Korea because the taxis are actually part of the public transit system in Korea. They're super cheap on their own. They're way cheaper than Uber is. So keep that in mind. Depending on where you go, taxis might actually not be expensive. It will be way cheaper for you to take a train, a bus, etc., to the city center and then take a taxi to your final destination than it will be to rent a car. It will also be way less stressful because someone else is doing the driving, someone who has a clue about where they're going, unlike you, who are just visiting that place possibly for the first time. So transit, I really do recommend taking advantage of the public transit system. And that can be an adventure, but here's the tip on that. The local tourist information, and make sure it's a real tourist information, not one of those sham ones that are just there to sell you tours. I mean the real city tourist information. And you can tell that by when you walk in, they don't try to sell you a tour. If they start trying to sell you a tour, walk away, go to the next aisle. Anyway, tourist information will always be able to tell you exactly how to take the public transit to where you need to go. When I was a student, very poor student, actually, not a trust fund baby, visiting Prague for the first time in 2000, I had no idea how to get from the city center back to catch my early morning flight. And I went to tourist information and she was like, oh yeah, no problem. Just catch the tram here at 4:30. It'll take you right to the airport. Like, yay, great. Well, no, she didn't tell me how to buy tickets and I had no idea because I'd never used public transit in Eastern Europe. And I never used public transit anywhere at that point. In Spain, I had a student card that allowed me to use public transit for free. It didn't apply in the Czech Republic. So I had no idea how to buy a ticket. I had no idea about tickets and validation. So I guess I should mention that. In a lot of places in the world, you buy a ticket for public transit and it gives you like a paper ticket. And you think, oh, great, I've got my ticket. And you get on your public transit method of choice, tram, bus, train, and you think, yeah, I'm covered. But then the public transit police get in the vehicle, and they check your ticket, see it isn't validated, and then ticket you for black riding. That's because there'll be a little machine, a little ticket stamper machine, either on the tracks or at the entry to the bus, in the tram, and you need to validate your ticket. So you've bought it, but it doesn't actually become valid until you stamp it. And that stamp basically means it can never be used again after a certain time. So make sure you stamp your ticket, you validate your ticket before you get on your method of public transit, or if it's the kind where you validate on the bus, the vehicle, validate on the vehicle, right? And, these are all things you can ask at tourist information. Now, when you get at the airport, there will also be a tourist when you land. Come in at an airport, there will also be a tourist information. You can get all this information from them. And that is what tourist information is there for. Never be afraid to ask. Okay, are there any questions? I've kind of been rambling at full speed now for about 31 minutes. Those were all the questions I had received, I believe, in advance. So again, if anything I said doesn't make sense or you have a desire for further information, please do let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, that was my spiel for the evening. Oh, medical. That's right. Someone asked me about medical. My mom keeps asking me about medical. Okay. For my peeps in the United States, if you travel, before you leave the country, you need to check with your relative healthcare provider about what their coverage is overseas, because we have this verkackte private system where everyone has a different policy and different levels of coverage. You need to find out before you go what they'll cover, how they'll cover it, and then you'll have a better idea of what your level of protection is. And here's the thing, if they don't cover much, I recommend getting a supplementary policy, supplementary travel health insurance policy. And these are actually not that expensive because not many people actually get sick and need hospitalization on vacation, but it can happen. It does happen, just not by the actuarial numbers, a huge percentage. So you might need to get a supplementary policy, and that's not just the United States. That applies worldwide, no matter what the country in which you live, no matter what your coverage is. If you don't already know, contact your health insurance provider. If you have government, like if it's the national health system, then reach out to your respective contact and ask them what your coverage is. I know a lot of my British friends always get supplementary health insurance when they travel. So reach out to your respective coverage provider and just ask the question, what is my coverage if I leave? Do you have a copy of the policy of what is covered if I'm abroad and require medical services? And also, then you want to find out what kind of documentation they need if they're going to reimburse you for your bill. So make sure that if you are traveling and you have to see a healthcare professional, a clinic, a hospital, whatever, make sure to get as much documentation as possible. Receipt of payment, a clearly itemized listing of services, and ideally in the language of your healthcare or your health insurance providers. Operations. Otherwise, you might have to get it translated, notarized, and translated. So make sure you get documentation. If you need healthcare while traveling, save the papers from it, everything, and ask first, because the hospital might not be accustomed to giving those things out, depending on their own local system. Make sure they can. You just might have to ask for it. So make sure to ask for it before you leave and come home, and then try to get all your bills reimbursed. Otherwise, most countries have very affordable healthcare systems. So even if you have to pay out of pocket, it's not going to be like in the US where it literally breaks you financially. My mother visited me when I was living in Germany once, and she developed a bronchial infection, and she went to see my doctor. My doctor ran like a dozen blood tests, gave her the full checkup, spent a good half hour with her, diagnosing and examining and listening, and gave her medication and all of that. Doctor's visit, testing, everything was like 130 euros. When we got the bill, I just paid it. I just, okay, whatever. That would have been hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in the US. So a lot of countries have very affordable healthcare. So even if you pay out of pocket, don't panic. It's probably going to be very affordable compared to what we Americans are, that to which we Americans are accustomed. Obviously, if you are part of live in a country with a reasonable healthcare system, then it's going to be a different relative experience for you. But there are often local doctors who are known to be bilingual. They're most, I'll be honest, everywhere I've been, when I've had to see a physician, they've always been able to speak a decent level of English. Now, I wouldn't necessarily count on them to hold forth about, Beowulf or Chaucer, but they can definitely hold enough of a conversation with you to communicate mutually. But also, a lot of hospitals worldwide have what are called international clinics. And they literally have full-time staff whose job it is to be able to communicate with tourists, with people, or foreigners. And generally it's going to be in English because, thank you, British Empire, the lingua franca is currently English. So that means that you will be able to communicate at some level. And also these days with the translation apps that they have, and it breaks my heart to say this because I used to be a professional translator until machines ate my job. The translation apps that they have these days, the interpreter apps that they have these days, can produce such quality communication that as long as you have your smartphone, or one of you has a smartphone, you can get by pretty well. Now, that being said, it is nice if you could learn, if you're going someplace, just learn the greeting of the day in the language. Learn how to say hello, learn how to say goodbye, learn how to say please, learn how to say thank you. By the way, not all languages have please. I'm thinking of Finnish offhand. So just learn a couple of key polite expressions, and also learn to say, do you speak English? Never just, most likely anyone with whom you interact is going to speak some level of English, but don't assume it. And always just learn key expressions. Hello, goodbye, please, thank you, do you speak English? It doesn't take much, and it really bridges that initial gap and just creates such goodwill, just a little bit of effort and such goodwill. And you'll be amazed at the kind of smiles and doors that will open that might have remained closed otherwise. Just that little bit of effort, right? To be good ambassadors of your home country, not just a sort of chauvinist tourist that thinks everyone should speak their language. And I don't care if you're an American, a Brit, a Russian, this applies, Chinese, this applies to all of us who are now mass touristing the world. You should always try to learn just those few expressions in the local language of the place you're going. It's just good policy. Okay, well, I think those were my questions, rather the questions that people had for me. As I said, let me know in the comments below once this publishes if anything I've said doesn't make sense, or if you have any other needs. Okay, well, I wish you all a good evening. Thank you all for watching whenever and from wherever you are doing so. May your travels be creative and safe. Catch you later, guys. I just realized